Magic is what happens when peace is near.
Hi everyone, and welcome to Season 8 of Enlightened Conversations. This season we're diving into all things 7D consciousness, what it is, what it isn't, and how it shows up in our everyday life. I'll also be sharing concepts from my new book, Pieces of Science, towards a unified peace theory, as we explore the fascinating overlaps between spirituality, human behaviour, consciousness, and how we can integrate more peace into our lives. So, without further ado, let's dive in.
You're here, together we are clear.
Hi everyone, it's Michelle Lightworker here, and welcome to another episode of Enlightened Conversations. So in this season, we are diving into 7D consciousness, and in episodes 1, 2, and 3, we explored consciousness through spirituality, trauma, healing, governance, and collective systems. We covered the political arena in our previous episode, which was huge, on understanding leadership as well, people in positions of power. And today we move into another really important conversation, neurodivergence. My previous guest will be joining me on this episode. And most importantly, we discuss how different ways that we process information are not broken or wrong. They're just different ways of processing reality, emotion, sensitivity, empathy, pattern recognition, and also connection as well. And in this episode, we explore 7D consciousness and neurodivergence through the lens of nervous systems, consciousness, regulation, masking, empathy, and belonging. And we also weave in concepts from peace as a science towards a unified peace theory, particularly the idea that coherence doesn't always organize the same way in every human system. Coherence itself is a way things work together, and how that works together is like a little jigsaw puzzle that everybody needs to work out. So let's dive into this fascinating, compassionate, and deeply human conversation with my guests. They all ask the same questions, they all respond uniquely, differently, not even me telling them anything about pieces of science. It's pure, unadulterated opinions of their own. And I really honour that in this episode and all the episodes, that they're true to their own map of 7D consciousness. So let's begin. Our first question that I ask all my guests is, how does neurodivergence interact with 7D consciousness? Let's hear from our first guest, Linda Willow Roberts.
I think they're very gifted. I think that they all have a talent, a craft, a spirit that's there. I think that each person is individual more so than any other person.
That was short and sweet, Linda, and it aligns beautifully with Pieces of Science, because we talk about how coherence itself doesn't organise identically across every person's nervous system, and difference is not automatically dysfunction, and sometimes it reflects variation in processing architecture and sensitivity, creativity, perception, and awareness. And rather than asking how people can become more normal, this conversation begins asking a different question: what gifts become possible when different minds are properly understood and supported, so that they're in a sense of peace with their own uniqueness? So yeah, I agree. Wonderful. Now let's hear from our next guest, Leanne Barefoot Medium.
I have some very different beliefs around the whole stuff that's going on in the consciousness around neurodivergence. Energetically, frequency-wise, and vibrationally, we all process and we all receive information and process that information differently. And if we know ourselves and are grounded and present and in our body and know how we work, we can get that out in a much more empowered and comprehensible way. And I come back to how people learn, for example, and teaching students in that space. It's knowing if you need to learn by seeing, by hearing, by touching, or practical means, and knowing that and putting the strategies and systems in place to support yourself with that. So I kind of feel like neurodivergence is a little bit of a way of kind of limiting people or keeping them stuck in a box.
Gotcha. Oh, Leanne, that's so true. That's so true. Labeling people can, unintentionally place people into fixed boxes, and they stop believing that they can move beyond those boxes. And sometimes we label people to create the support, the understanding, the validation that they can say, oh, that's me, I identify, or what have you. But then when it becomes something that, oh, I can't move beyond this. And Pieces of Science helps to explore the idea that human dynamics with their own internal systems are adaptive and constantly evolving, and our nervous systems may process differently, but that does not mean a person is limited to a single identity or a capacity or a future trajectory even. And the goal isn't to deny neurodivergence, but it's to create awareness around how we can regulate, support, understand people, and help with that grounding that you mentioned too. When a neurodivergent person who identifies there is able to say, well, let me learn about me and how I can actually learn more about my processing ability, and then unlock those amazing gifts and potential and individuality and humanity, like how they connect with the world. I actually worked in learning support for a while in a Steiner school as well, and I found that, yes, when you actually are able to meet a person at their map of the world, it's so validating. It's so incredibly life-changing and transformative when people feel understood. Now let's hear from our next guest, Chris Childs.
Interesting question. And one of the interesting things about neurodivergence is that many neurodivergent people are already used to experiencing the world differently from the majority. So in some ways, that naturally supports higher awareness, because they're less likely even to just assume that everyone sees reality the same way. And in NLP, we talk about the idea that the map is not the territory. I love that, because it means that everyone experiences the world through their own filters, and neurodivergent people and individuals often notice those differences earlier because their filters work differently from the norm anyway. And that can lead to very deep levels of insight about thinking patterns, systems, and human behavior. So rather than me seeing neurodivergence as something that needs fixing, it can often be understood that it's just a different operating system. And a big part of NLP is learning about respecting other people's take on the world, other people's maps of the world. If you respect that everyone has their own map of the world and they're taking this information in differently, and we talk about how 2 million bits of information will flow to you, and you might only take 126 of those in, and we delete, generalize, and distort what we're actually seeing. So 5 different people will see the same thing, react, see, and feel 5 different things.
Yes, that's so true, Chris. Oh my goodness, yes. The map is not the territory. I love that. And that means our interpretation of reality, or neurodivergent people who experience different processing, they are aware that other people's reality is not reality itself. Brilliant, brilliant, brilliant. And in Pieces of Science, we talk about how that can create issues for them, because they start to pretend and adapt in environments that lack the flexibility to acknowledge their map of the world and how they process differently. And that can create mental health issues. So that's a very good point that you make there, Chris. And it can lead to challenges for neurodivergent individuals. And now let's hear from our next guest, Satyavani, on how does neurodivergence interact with 7D consciousness?
Quite smoothly, believe it or not. When you're really open and you are doing the inner work and you've got some of the basics, you've got the knack of the basics, it's actually quite smooth in terms of the integration and the interaction, because it's like fish to water. It feeds you, because why? It's coming from a very pure space on a soul level, because it's like, yep, I'm home. This is home. This is fixed. Yep. This making it. It's like, oh my God, everything feels right, and that's the senses, and that's the feeling that will start taking place. So it is quite smooth.
Yes, and speaking from the perspective of a neurodivergent person connecting with 7D, that makes so much sense, Satyavani, and that's what I think you're alluding to there. And from a unified peace theory perspective, 7D interacting with individuals experiencing neurodivergence can feel like those moments where everything suddenly clicks into alignment. The nervous systems settle, the mind stops fighting itself, emotions feel less chaotic, and there's a sense of internal coherence rather than contradiction and dissonance. And it's not necessarily euphoric or dramatic. It's often just simple, clear, steady, deeply right. And in Paces of Science, this is described less as escaping reality and more as the layers of the self beginning to cooperate instead of compete, allowing peace to move into this living experience within the human system. So it can be quite profound for neurodivergent individuals to experience that. And now we're going to move on to Karen Andrews Roberts, our next guest.
Well, who's to know that these beautiful neurodivergent beings aren't already in 7D consciousness, and they've come to help, raise the frequency of the planet. For so many of them, their hearts are so pure, and it's really the world that starts to taint that. So maybe they're already in 7D consciousness and they're here to help elevate us. So if we can meet them there. Yeah, maybe we're all really helping to lift us all into 7D consciousness.
Beautifully put, Karen. Beautifully put, Karen. I love that. Yeah, sometimes it's not the loudest person in the room, is it? It's the stabilizing presence in the room that calms the whole room. In Pieces of Science, we explore that 7D isn't about who uses spiritual language and who doesn't. It's about coherence. And some people may never speak about dimensions, fields, or consciousness at all, and yet they still naturally operate from steadiness or compassion, integrity, humility, or what you've talked about there, pure hearts and, calming rooms, reducing conflict, holding people together, helping us feel safer simply through how you're moving through life, And from a unified peace theory perspective, that would still represent transmissible coherence. In other words, they may already be participating in the field without needing to name it. Yeah, I agree, Karen. I think sometimes the people helping elevate humanity are not the loudest voices explaining peace. They're the quiet stabilizers living it. And now we're on to our next question, which is, what unique perspectives do neurodivergent individuals bring to higher awareness? Let's hear from Linda first up.
They see things differently. For starters, they're not in that limited frame. When you try and put them into a limited box, and this is linear, this is what you've got to be like, it doesn't work for them. Goes the bird outside. They just look at things so loud, differently, that they can just, it's fascinating. How they see the world is fascinating, and that's the higher consciousness, because they're open to things and feelings and are sensitive to everything. They just feel a lot more.
Yes, and sometimes they do feel more, and sometimes that can be super overwhelming. And that is why it's so super important actually to be exploring how we can support people better with peace as a science, and to respect that the overwhelm, and to help to find solutions in the way we set society up, so that our beautiful spectrum of processing is supported, not just by policies, procedures, and support groups, but also through knowledge in the general community too. Let's now move on to Leanne and hear from her.
I believe we all bring different perspectives. We all are humans with different lived experience, with different thought patterns, different emotions, different ways of being in the world. So the way I come at it is we bring that to our connection with universe, source, divine consciousness, whatever that is. And it's a two-way relationship. It's not one way. So we receive that and we give that energy in return.
I really love how, Leanne, you've brought in the field here and talked about how, as we support neurodivergent people to understand their map of how they connect in a 7D conscious way, that they can then bring that back into the greater field, and they feed the greater field. So yes, it starts with our understanding them too. Then, of course, that helps them to support their relationship with their 7D consciousness. Then they have the mechanisms in place that they can then feed that back. Boom shakalaka moment, mic drop, love it. Next up, we've got Chris Childs.
They bring extraordinary pattern recognition, creativity. They're often really unconventional at problem solving. They'll often question assumptions that everyone else takes for granted. And that's incredibly valuable, because progress usually comes from someone asking, why? Why do we do this way? So in a world of personal development and consciousness work, that kind of questioning can really open up an entirely new way of thinking, because neurodivergent minds may also have a really strong ability to actually focus deeply on areas of interest. For example, my son, he was neurodivergent, and if he was interested in something, he knew everything about that inside out, backwards. He was the world's famous, guru of that. If it didn't interest him, didn't survive. Which is why neurodivergency needs a different education system. It needs everything about it differently. So different can actually be a powerful strength when it's understood and supported.
Oh my goodness, yes, Chris. And thank you for that addition. I can relate because I identify as ADHD, but I call that attention dialed into a higher dimension rather than labeling myself like something that I have to manage. I actually find that I am quite good at moderating my reality these days. However, I still always have all these projects on the go, and I love that. And thank you for calling me a machine. I think one of your comments on my Facebook posts was, "You're a machine." It's just my ADHD. I just love doing stuff, and I'm always creative doing things. And it's just so wonderful when we can celebrate neurodivergence in that way. And some of the best artists and creators and innovators were neurodivergent. I love it. And next up, we have Satyavani helping us.
They keep it really simple. There's no over-explanation. There's none of that. It is just very, very simple. And it is easy to understand, easy to feel. Again, because it's coming from the communication, especially, is happening from a vibration, from that pure, clean vibration, energetic feel as you're vocalizing it. That's what is being received by the other party. So that's where the difference is with 7D. it's not so much the word, it's the vibration that the other is feeling. So that's where it is actually a lot smoother and a lot cleaner and more effective.
Yeah, that speaks loudly to the whole sensitive issue when it comes to neurodivergent individuals and whether or not they are sensing like a radio frequency tower, the energy around them, and amplifying it internally. So that can be also something we can be mindful of, what we bring to the table in terms of our own sense of calm. To be around a neurodivergent individual can also amplify what they're feeling as well. And I think that because they are so sensitive on that frequency level, they do bring a beautiful frequency with them. However, if they are the amplifier of a frequency that's higher, they can also be an amplifier of a frequency of the collective around them as well that might be vibrating at a lower level. So therefore, it's nice to respect what we bring to the table around sensitivities as well. Let's hear from Karen lastly.
Well, I think if we give them more of a chance, we'd have a deeper understanding of this. But again, I think they have this openness. There's having worked with neurodivergent people and grown up with a neurodivergent brother and having neurodivergent people in my extended family, their hearts, again, they're just so pure. They don't judge. And so I think for us to have more of a care to understand how they think, how they perceive our world would be a really beautiful thing and very helpful for them to be understood more and share their wisdom and help us lift our frequency.
Yeah, lovely perspective, Karen. And I think too, it's like an accounting department. You can look at assets and liabilities on the balance sheet. And at the moment, I think we see neurodivergent as a liability rather than an asset. And I think we need to really switch our thinking around and say, look, you know what? They've got a lot they can bring to the books here. And we just haven't tapped into it. So that doesn't make them, that makes us ignorant. It doesn't make them, broken or something wrong with them, right? Untapped resource. Beautiful. All right, now we're moving on to our third question, which is how can society better support neurodivergent minds through awareness? And first up, we have Linda.
Education department for starters. Oh my God. They don't teach them with their emotions. They teach them, like I said, in that one box. They're not getting to know their emotions and what they feel and what they see. And I think that it's more of a personal level. I think the classrooms are way too big for them. The noise. I mean, I know what I was like when I was first, and my daughter's a gynecologist. No, she's not. I can't believe I said that. She's a guidance officer. So far removed, still kids, but so far removed. Now I've lost my train of thought. Oh, she's diagnosed me, but when I was learning spirituality really early on, so probably in my early 30s, noise, I couldn't handle noise. You'd put something on and it would be like, and then you get a bit further and then you can't stand the light, or there was something. So you go through your spiritual development and all your senses are heightened. And they live like that all the time. That's just not something that it stops for them, and it's got better for me. I mean, I can go back into me and anything could be happening around and I'll still stay aligned, but they don't have that.
Yeah, well, thanks, Linda. You've really touched on something close to my heart here, which is the education of children. And I studied Steiner education back in 93 and 94 and got a job as a Steiner teacher in New South Wales, but then moved to Queensland where you had to be an actual registered teacher to practice. So I never actually went into it. But I defaulted across to adults because I felt a natural affinity to do that. But wow, didn't it help me with my parenting my children, understanding children, also being a learning support teacher. And we talk about in Pieces of Science, we talk about educating children in peace literacy. And so this shouldn't be any different for neurodivergent individuals. And often it will help us to understand before we start to diagnose and box and all those kind of things, how we can support our children better. So we address how we do that in different stages in education as well, and different ways to do that. And also that peace literacy for adults as well, so that we can bring our energy better to our children in a parenting or a teacher role or other adult role. So, yeah, that's awesome. Thanks. And Leanne, let's hear from Leanne now.
Just become present to how other people in your world think and how they feel and what they need. And sometimes that comes back to understanding what you need first and then being able to communicate that to others. So if you can do that, and I'm thinking relationships in particular, you can then voice what you need in order to feel loved, heard, understood. And they're usually our core needs in relationships. And then, you know, other people will know how to support us in return. So it's about just being able to voice and communicate what we need, and vice versa, and receive that.
Yes, and thank you. If anyone who is listening identifies with being in any way, shape or form processing information or sensitive in feeling, or it doesn't matter, the labels don't matter. But if you identify with what we're talking about, basically, it's about learning about yourself and your map of the world and what you need, and to be able to be okay about communicating those needs. So that's the journey that I would suggest as well to be on, so that you can actually ask for what you need to support yourself in a guilt-free way, because you matter and you're equal to everybody else in this whole entire world. So if there's one thing that you get from this, is you matter, honor you, learn about your map, learn about what you need, and it's okay to ask. Okay, now moving on to Chris.
Yeah. So the first step of understanding that that diversity in thinking is not a flaw in the system. It's actually part of a healthy system. Just like ecosystems thrive on biodiversity, societies thrive with cognitive diversity, because supporting neurodivergent individuals really means creating an environment where different communication styles and sensory needs and working styles are actually respected. And it probably also, bringing back curiosity, it requires curiosity instead of judgment. Because when people ask, how does this person, really experience the world, rather than why aren't they the same as everybody else? Because the entire conversation shifts. Awareness actually allows us to design systems that work for more people, rather than forcing everyone to fit inside that one narrow model.
So true, Chris. And what we've spoken about in our previous episodes with the 12 core stabilizers of peace, open-mindedness being one of them, that curiosity is incredible to relationships thriving and inviting peace into the picture. So when we get frustrated or judgmental when we're in conversation with people, that really stomps in on peace, just slams it down. But when we actually keep an open mind and invite, what could I learn from this? What I could possibly learn, anything from this, what would it be? Then we open up not only the peace field around us, but that will impact on sensitive individuals as well. They will feel it, and the energy will shift inside of them as well, because they won't be fighting the noise coming at them from the judgment and so on. Yeah, so open-mindedness and curiosity are absolutely incredible, powerful peace tools. Now we're moving on to Satyavani.
More light workers stepping forward and teaching, showing, perhaps even using different types of communication language to get those interested, to know more, to teach them, to keep it very, very simple, because as from what I have already seen from the higher 11, 12 dimension, in terms of structures that are changing, is on a soul level. There's a massive gravitation to the 7D consciousness and knowledge being disseminated from the higher realms to light workers and humanity in general, who may not be practicing as light workers, but those who are already awoken and are working in different different fields. So it is very much sharing of knowledge, and workshops, teachings, just things like that is what's going to work.
Now, let's hear from Karen on how society can better support neurodivergent minds through awareness.
Let go of judgment. If we're judging, take responsibility for it. Stop. Stop, stop flowing with judgment. Take responsibility for your stuff. It's so important that we're conscious and we're aware of our stuff, because when we are, judgment's not there anymore. When we have that ability to look at things from a higher perspective and witness what's going on, we step out of judgment then. We're into the witnessing part, and that's where we learn. That's where we learn much more, when we let go of our judgment.
Yeah, I think, Karen, there's a big difference between not judging, trying not to judge, isn't there? Like when we step into our own 7D awareness, our own higher self, our own witnessing perspective, it isn't really that hard not to judge. We're just in it. We understand, we're seeing a bigger picture. We feel a better connection to the individual in front of us, whoever they might be. And so that we're less likely to inject toxic or contamination into that interactional relationship. So, I love that. And the core principle stabilizer of responsibility helps us do that, because if we are aware of our own self, if we are judging, that's cool. We can just go do work on that and go, oh, I need to pick myself up here and do something and love myself and have compassion. I stepped into judgment, and then just go do that work and not make it about that interaction. And we get better at that as time goes on. So it doesn't have to be instant. It can take time to get there. But, that's the goal. So working towards it is really cool, to feel like, hey, I'm making progress towards a better society and supporting all kinds of individuals in a better way as well from that. Now we're going to move on to our next question, which is what practices help neurodivergent individuals integrate consciousness daily? And first up, we've got Linda.
Yeah, I actually had a lady once when I lived on the sunny coast years ago, and I can't even remember what her son had, but I said to her, get some copper and make a mobile and put over his bed. Don't tell him what it's for. And I said, but it just brings you into alignment. There's a lot more out there that you can do to work. Like there's meditations, there's sound healings. Look at Joe Dispenza, what he's doing with kids, and copper. And it's all now being proven in science. So they're now trialing different things, and it's just, but we've always known that meditation and food and senses and smells and copper and things like that can help with them and help align what they do. But that's a question for Holly. She'd be really good at answering that.
Yeah, Linda, I think what's important here is that people find their own way around what feels like grounding for them, like even little rituals. If meditation doesn't work, that's cool. Doesn't work for everybody. If they don't have a good attention span, I found visual meditations work for me rather than the breathing ones. I find I breathe better when I'm exercising, and that's probably that sort of attention dialed into the high dimension ADHD stuff that I need to move. It's different for everyone, and I think that honouring that as a process and a journey for the neurodivergent individual is really super important. And trial and error sometimes. It is just literally about that, isn't it? Trial and error. And on to Leanne. What have Leanne got to say about some practices that support neurodivergent individuals?
Grounding. And that might be taking a moment to still, and that doesn't mean just sitting. That may mean stillness in terms of walking and having a bit of a rhythm going to move the body at the same time as you still the mind, because it's usually the mind that's going, or the emotions that are going, not necessarily the physical body. Sometimes it is. And so movement and rhythm can help, particularly if there's trauma involved in that, to shift that and keep you present and grounded and in your body.
You must have read my mind from what I just said before you said what you said. Yeah, Leanne, it reminds me of something funny too, hey, because when I get angry, sometimes I clean really vigorously, like it's the way I'm cleaning, because I like to clean, it's fine, but it's like the way I'm cleaning, it's like, and then Tony will say to me, "Are you okay, honey?" You can kind of sense something might be up with me. Oh, I don't know what else I'm going to say about that. I think I've said enough about it. But anyway, let's move on to Chris. Yeah.
It really is many of the same awareness practices that supports everyone's growth can be helpful here. Things like journaling, reflective thinking, mindfulness, even structured routines that create mental clarity. So for some neurodivergent individuals, clear systems and predictable structures actually make it easier to access the higher awareness, because the environment feels safer, it feels less overwhelming. So from an NLP perspective, understanding one's own thinking style and sensory preferences, and even your internal processing, can be incredibly empowering. So when someone understands how their mind works, they can actually design strategies that work with their brain rather than constantly fighting against it.
Yeah, predictability. Oh my God, it helps so much with helping to bring back that feeling of safety for individuals. And we do speak about this in our neurodivergence section, and also speaking to all the things that can support us in general in our applications section, all the little things that we can do for our bodies, for our etheric bodies, for our astral bodies, for our mind, for our higher self. So we break it all down so that we can all benefit from all the unique spectrum of tools that can support us. And also, I think it's important to say that uncertainty and instability can push nervous systems towards hypervigilance, and predictable environments and safety, creativity, learning and connection could all support neurodivergent individuals, and all of us as well. And now let's hear from Sathya Varney on what practices help neurodivergent individuals integrate consciousness daily.
Silence. Just half an hour a day, silence. Even if it's half an hour in the morning, half an hour in the evening, it is very much about that silence, because when you're in that alpha state is when you're getting a lot of the declutter, and evenings as well. It is just very much about that centeredness again. It's just silence. It's just that quietness, no noise.
Yep, silence itself, it can be like the remedy for overstimulation for some neurodivergent individuals. It can be the way their system actually feels that it can provide a gap between sensory input, noise, pressure, stimulation, helping the nervous system to settle, to process, to return to balance. And from a 7D perspective, silence can also create room for a deeper awareness and intuition, listening to ourselves, coherence emerging, creativity. We can hear ourselves think better. Sometimes we need to hear ourselves think. And Peace as a Science speaks about peace not simply as the absence of conflict, but the conditions that support regulation and connection. And silence itself can become one of those stabilizing conditions. Sometimes healing is not adding more information. It's reducing noise enough for individuals to hear themselves again. sometimes more is less. Let's hear from Karen.
I would say meditation is really, really helpful. I've seen EFT tapping have beautiful impacts on neurodivergent people, and being around people that accept them and want to understand them more deeply will help neurodivergent people to feel more accepted and that they matter.
Yes, mattering can be stabilizing too, can't it, Karen? And I love that you mentioned EFT tapping again, because we mentioned that in a previous episode with trauma, and that's the emotional freedom technique, and it works on tapping on various parts of the acupressure or the chi flow lines in the traditional Chinese medicine model, and it's really, really powerful to release and stabilize individuals, release emotional stagnation and also heightened emotional states. It's a beautiful one. And meditation, of course, we've mentioned. So now we're on to our last question, which is, how can listeners deepen empathy and understanding for neurodivergent experiences? And first up, we have Linda.
Have that conversation. Stay present. Just stay present and have that conversation, or, just be the observer, not the judgments. We're not here to judge. That's the creator's deal, whatever we don't understand, that doesn't mean that we need to judge it. It's just something that happens. But be more present and really be more patient. And I think that comes to you yourself, because that's how you are. So however you are is what you're going to, come across.
Thanks, Linda. That reminds me of the old slogan, let it begin with me, that I experienced in 12-step programs back in my eating disorder recovery days in Sydney many moons ago. And it is what we bring to the table. And that, I believe, is very important when it comes to this question of how we can deepen empathy and understanding. Because if we understand ourselves then and have empathy and compassion for ourselves, then we spend less time judging other people. And that's why I always have compassion for people who are judging. I'm thinking, oh my gosh, you have to live with you. Gee whiz, compassion to you, because how difficult must you feel in your world? And now on to Leanne.
I think empathy comes back, empathy and compassion and emotional intelligence is kind of what I'm hearing there is a skill that we can develop, and empathy is a core part of emotional intelligence, and that requires us to be not only aware of ourselves but aware of others and the impact. And so it comes back to that presence, awareness, groundedness and acceptance, so that you can have empathy and compassion for others' lived experiences, others' thoughts, others' ways of being, and allow that to be what it is without the need to control or change it.
One of my most favourite things that we talk about in Peace as a Science is how we can help restore dignity. And the stabilising core principle of love helps us to do that. And when we can bring that unconditional positive regard to the table in relationships, we are actually coming from a place of compassion and love, and holding that space for other people actually allows and invites a restoration of dignity. And a lot of mental health issues are created through loss of dignity, through shame and through personal judgment and through feeling less than. So if we can bring that compassion and love to the table, and having that emotional literacy and intelligence enough to be able to say, what am I bringing to the table here, and how is this impacting my environment, as Leanne so beautifully put it, then we will start to actually help dignity restoration within individuals, which is very powerful stuff. Because when people feel they matter, and when people feel like they are a unique spark in this universe that can contribute wonderful things, that lights them up, and we can be a part of that. Now on to Chris.
I'm going to bring out my curiosity again. I think the most powerful tool really is curiosity. So instead of assuming everyone's experiences, situations in the same way, we can actually ask questions and listen with genuine interest. Active listening is another part of NLP's teachings. When you actually listen to understand rather than listen to reply. Our brains just stop listening because we assume the answer, the finish of the question, and we start to respond, or we even finish people's sentences. So if we can listen with genuine interest, neurodivergent experiences can just vary so widely. So the goal isn't to create stereotypes, but actually to develop understanding, because when people understand and recognize that different minds process different emotions and information differently, empathy and all of the other things naturally just increase. So quite often people discover that those different perspectives actually add a richness and creativity to communities. In other words, the goal isn't uniformity. The goal is actually understanding.
Chris, you sound as passionate about curiosity as I do about open-mindedness. And that's why it's one of the core principles. We actually talk about it scientifically as increasing optionality, increasing choices. So it's actually huge, like massive science nerdy thing. When it comes to neurodivergence and understanding it, having that open-mindedness and curiosity is really important, because it can look so different to how we usually process. We could just blanket it because we can't cope with the difference. So we just have to remember that being open-minded means we can take things, we can also include pacing ourselves in that open-mindedness too. If something feels triggering or overwhelming for us with a certain individual and it's just too much, we can honor that as well, and we can pace. We can have that stabilizing principle of discipline come in and allow us to have small increments. We might need to take more time with certain individuals and educate ourselves rather than try and tough it out because it might be too much for our system. So that's a way then to then go, oh, I need to prioritize my own nervous system in this situation. Otherwise, I'm just not adding any coherence to this scenario, and that's okay. It's okay to have limits. Okay, and next we're going to hear from Satyavani.
To show empathy is, again, very much treat others in how you wish to be treated. It's simple. 7G is not as complex as it may be made out to be. It is so simple, yet it is so true and it is so real. So there's no need to overcomplicate it. So it is very much treat them as you wish to be treated, because you will learn a lot as well.
When we talk about soul contracts in our expansion section of Pieces of Science, we talk about timeline bleed-throughs and soul contracts, and that the universe will keep repeating patterns until we get the lessons. So therefore, everybody in our life that we have in our sphere is there to educate us. And so this idea of humility doesn't become so strange, because if we're here to learn and heal, and in this one isolated incarnation that we're in right now intersects with the past that's happened and the future that we create, then we need to remain in that humility. And as we remain in that humility, we actually learn that everybody on our path, including those who might process differently, are also part of that picture. And that can help us settle our nervous system away from fear, judgment, control, into more acceptance, love, and an open heart. And lastly, we're going to hear from Karen.
Talk to neurodivergent people they're everywhere. They're everywhere. Learn more about them.
Yeah.
Step out of our own little space sometimes and learn more about other people. When we do that, we learn new things that we might not have known before, and hopefully that helps to open our awareness and our ability to connect and be kind. And yeah.
Thanks, Karen. Yeah, talk to me. Whoever thought I'm sure, I had an ADHD, my mum, and also then my brother, and then I'm the third one. And then it's like I'm hiding my ADHD because I think my mum's was kind of pretty full on, but then my brother's was even more full on, and so then I had to mask mine to cope, I think. So yeah, you get good at masking, don't you? And I did terrible at school and just wasn't coping with all the feelings and all the things around me. So sometimes if you just take a moment and just have curiosity, like Chris mentioned, just take a moment to acknowledge maybe what might be happening for somebody, that maybe assume that they've got it. How's that for a tip? Assume someone is neuro and then see what unfolds, see what you can learn. See, I never thought I'd suggest this at the end of this episode, but there you are. And our next episode is going to be on 7D and LGBTQIA awareness. So we're going to be talking about all things divergent on another level and diverse on another level. We're going to be talking about how 7D consciousness relates to gender and sexual identity, and how our higher awareness can support authentic self-expression, and how it affects intimacy, community support, and we're going to also talk about how listeners can foster integration, navigate those challenges, and how they can create more inclusive and conscious spaces for themselves and also society. So until next time, lots of love to you all. Peace in and peace out.
Magic is what happens